You're listening to Tiger and the Viper. 16. When the van arrived at the dormitories, I made sure to be the first one at the door. It wasn't the heart meds or the stabilizers I was worried about going missing. I was more scared about the valuable medication stashed in the nightstand. I took a quick breath. Maybe I had really misplaced a container somewhere in the locker room or the showers. It wasn't hard to imagine this as the true explanation. I was low on sleep, delirious, and in whole body pain. Maybe I'd just put them somewhere stupid. I'd be at the studio again tomorrow anyway, and I could look for them before practice. But Yevhenii's strange expression from the back of the bus gave me a deep dread in the pit of my stomach. Sure, she was a messed up person, but she wouldn't go that far, right? I raced up the stairwell trying to make it up to the rooms before anyone else. No one was supposed to know I was on meds, not Yevhenii, not the instructors. My life here was hard enough as it was at the academy. If anyone knew I was being propped up by medication just to keep me moving, I'd lose any and all credibility as a candidate. Sure, the label knew, but that was only because they were footing the bill on the whole experiment. I slid over to the cabinet in the corner of the room, pulling open the metal drawer. My heart fluttered and then stood still for too many moments. That's when a feeling settled down over me, dripping down my spine like an unexpected dribble of cold rain. The drawer was clearly ransacked. They were gone. Not just some of them, but all of them. The backup heart pills, the mood stabilizers, the pain meds. The worst of them being the K-nose spray that had been stashed in the back of the drawer, hidden underneath folded bras and tank tops. I turned both drawers upside down onto the dark floor and rummaged through everything, not even noticing when the other girls began to file in and get changed. I could only hear the roar of blood in my ears. What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? It became a mantra, mouthed out silently as I brushed through all of the unfurled contents on the floor. I couldn't bring myself to care if people were staring at this point because the bigger problem was lingering over the horizon. I'd just lost track of a Schedule III drug on academy premises. I was fucked. But it wasn't an accident. I hadn't lost track of anything. They'd been stolen. The vindicated relief was fleeting. If I hadn't lost the meds, that meant that someone found out about them, all of them, and had taken them on purpose. I could only guess out of cruelty and a desire to knock me out of the running for Group A. My guess was that they didn't realize what kind of harm they'd be putting me under without my meds. But knowing some of the girls here and how the industry had already shaped them, I don't think that they'd care. A dead girl could be blamed on the rigorous program, outside factors. She'd also be one less body on the roster, one less girl on the way to the top. My mind drifted back to Yevhenii. There would have been no way that she'd have access to my drawers because I'd been by my bed all yesterday evening and had taken my meds this morning, and she'd been with the Group B girls at practice and studio all day. The only thing that made sense is that she wasn't the only one involved. At least one other person from a different group had helped her, which meant that there were enough girls in the program who hated me enough to get rid of me. The realization made my stomach do a queasy flip. It felt naive to be surprised, but I was surprised all the same. The kid shows I'd done, like the Plague Castle Hour, had its fair share of nasty competition, sure. But most of it had come from meddling from the producers, momagers, kids with unchecked egos. Competition in the academy took on a different note. There was no low these girls weren't willing to go down to. I'd known this on an abstract level. It wasn't like the bullying was new to me. But this was my first time seeing a type of serrated meanness that didn't care about the consequences or the collateral. And there wasn't some adult I could go tell. If I told anyone now, it would just look like I was a junkie abusing meds that no one knew I was on. There wasn't any proof that would say otherwise. If I started accusing anyone in the program blindly, I'd effectively turn whatever support I had left against me. I felt a hot slice of anger. I hadn't asked for any of this. I didn't want this like the other girls did. I never dreamt about being a star. I'd been conscripted. And every day there was someone else reminding me of how lucky I was supposed to be. Now with my meds on the loose and a house full of other teenage girls, none of this felt lucky. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a tall figure in my periphery, just lingering by one of the bunks. I'd worked alongside Yevhenii long enough to recognize her body language. She didn't have a bunk in this room, but one down the hall, and there was no reason for her to be here besides to gloat. "Damn, NJ really looking like a fiendo right now," one of the girls murmured over in my direction. "What are you looking for?" I lost something," I muttered, trying to wipe the haunted look off my face as I put the contents of my drawers back where they belonged. I changed, climbed into bed, my heart hammering so hard in my chest that I was convinced my bunkmate could hear it below. This wasn't going to get solved tonight, so catching even a little bit of sleep was my only option right now. Morning came in a sickly spill of light across the horizon. I hadn't managed to catch a single shred of sleep, going over scenarios in my head all night with my heart thundering hard in my chest that it left it hurting. I sat up, wiping the sweat sticking my bangs to my face. The exhaustion and returning pain, unmasked now by painkillers and nasal spray, bloomed in my body as I began to move around. Climbing down from the bunk quietly, I began to prep for an early practice. There was only one full day left before selections, and I was worse for wear. I stretched my cramping limbs slowly under the hot water in the shower, trying to think of my next steps. I hadn't made any friends in the program. My experience as a kid had proven that to be a liability. Mom had told me so many times that other cast members weren't my friends, they were my replacement if I fell behind even a little bit. But lacking allies also left me vulnerable. There wasn't a friend I could confide in here, no one to vouch for me. If I advocated for myself, I'd just be painted as someone stirring the pot. Sunrise painted the white skyline of Malibu a deep, breathtaking gold by the time I left the dorm. I jumped on the bus heading downtown, sliding past the sleepy passengers to take a seat in the back. The acetate windows were marred with vinyl stickers, the splattered curved lines of broad-tipped marker, and scraped-in names of people I'd probably never meet. In a book I'd read a long time ago, there was a passage about graffiti in ancient times. Apparently, they found evidence of graffiti in Egypt and Rome, the most well-preserved being the graffiti carved into the walls of Pompeii. Political slogans, business transactions, proclamations of love. The light flickered through the jagged, scribbled lines on the window. Even almost 2 millennia later, much about us hadn't changed. Our lives were short and full of turmoil, and we still wanted people to know when we had been here, even if it wasn't for very long. I felt the unexpected prick of tears in my eyes, which I blinked away. Would people know that I'd been here, or would I get shuffled away as some uncomfortable anecdote in history somewhere? A footnote without a name, like one of the early countless animals who'd gotten shot into the void of space without their say. I wondered about my contract and the clauses about death. Would Mom and Dad still be expected to pay back my debt if the label's medical care failed to keep me alive? Would it be easier if I just died and saved everyone the trouble? Foxhill Drive, the automated voice came crackling over the loudspeaker. I felt my body rise automatically without registering the will to move and fall into the line of shuffling bodies as we disembarked off the bus. Even when the desire to keep going started to peter out, the animal inside still kept running the same scripts. We were hostage, I guess, in a lot of ways, to the body trying to preserve itself. Outside, the entirety of Foxhill Drive was awake, already vibrating with the frenetic energy of rush hour traffic. People speeding along to get to work on time, vendor carts already rolled in and ready for business. Foxhill sat in the shadow of the honeycomb seawall, in dark for most of the day while the skyscrapers of the financial district basked in warm gold light, shimmering in the distance. The rows of neat towers in Rainsford Plaza sitting high at elevation, glittering like toys set aside out of reach from a clumsy child. As I made my way through the press of bodies on the street, I remember the message from my parents and wondered what they were doing right now. Was my mom making my sleeping dad breakfast? Was she quietly shuffling over a hot square pan, prodding the fluffy eggs with her chopsticks? Was she helping him out of bed with his bad back? What about her coffee? Was she slugging it down in her old tattered slippers? My heart felt a pang of longing, and I could feel myself swing between the complicated squeeze of wishing that I could get her a new pair of slippers to the regret of not being able to see them more often, to the knowledge that pushing harder here at the academy had a chance of lifting them from their struggle. And I knew that there was no way that I could do all three at the same time. I checked my terminal and the unanswered message from my mom. I started to type a reply, trying to come up with something to say that didn't come across as beaten down as I felt. I tried 3 times before deleting everything and backing out of the message. A moment later, my terminal vibrated softly in my hand. Mom and Dad, we love you. Are you eating well? My vision blurred as I made it down Fox Hill Drive, terminal in hand. I knew how to answer that question at least. Love you. I'm eating well, healthy too. Mom and Dad, good. Take care of yourself. The walk uphill left me winded and overheated in my sweatshirt. The train finally evened out as Fox Hill Drive split off into Los Encinos. I sucked in a breath and hoped that I didn't wipe out half of this morning's energy by trekking in myself, feeling every bit of lingering pain as it chipped away at my desire to start practice early, especially with a 9-hour session ahead of me. I caught that thought by its tail and blinked it away. Even if I didn't want to keep doing any of this, even if I was tired, I had to keep going. At least until I could afford a less shitty pair of slippers for Mom. The label compound was already fully lit and teeming with activity when I swiped in. The half-awake guards waved me through the metal detector and then blearily went back to their coffee. Group C was in their first session of heels practice down the hall. I winced as I watched them wobble through the steps. I didn't envy them. 3 girls in my group had twisted their ankles in their first week of heels practice. The class simply had carried on without them. One stupid misstep cost them everything. Junior classes were underway down the hall, lecture rooms resonating with their vocal warm-ups. Group B's practice studio was empty and dark when I swiped my keycard against the door. I dropped my things on the floor and headed to the center of the dim room. Slowly, I lowered myself into a butterfly stretch, then started to roll my shoulders to loosen them up. I could feel every joint pop uncomfortably, reminding me that they were there. Afterwards, I straightened out my knees, leaning down into a toe touch. After that, I ended stretches at the bar. I held the stretches until the pain mellowed out and left behind a fluidity in the muscles. Then I started on steps. I didn't want the light on in the empty studio. The light spilling in from the open door was enough. With everyone gone, I could focus on just the steps, how sharp my movements were, and if any of it was readable. In the empty studio, I didn't have to worry about the noise, managing anyone else's egos, or protecting my feet from getting stepped on in heels. I just had to make sure that the motion made sense in my body. My arms swept over my head, snapping into place in front of my face, then coming to rest at my sides. I let my body bend at the waist, using the momentum to let my feet carry me through my backward steps. 1 all the way through 5, and then back to my marker to try it all over again. My forehead was drenched by the time the girls began to stream into the studio, yawning. Yevhenii strolled through the doors, duffel slung over her shoulder, laughing with a group of girls. She grew silent as the grave when she saw me in the middle of the studio. The curved line of her pouty lips soured a little, and she made a production of trying to ignore my presence. I could tell in the glances I caught over the shoulders of other girls that she was angry I came to practice today, let alone earlier than her. "Minjae, when did you get in today?" one of the girls shouted from the direction of the locker room. I shrugged into my stretch. I'm not sure, I forgot to check the time. The truth of it didn't so much matter as how it made them feel. If I gave them an exact time, I ran the risk of either bragging or being accused of laziness. I didn't need to put too fine a point on things, especially when they were primed to receive me in the worst light possible. "That must be cram school for all the steps you keep missing then," Yevhenii called back, peeling off her sweatshirt to prep for practice. The comment won her some derisive laughter from the wings. I decided not to reward her comment with a reaction and just rolled into another stretch, hands slipping on my slick legs. My body protested at being pushed as hard on 1 Americano and 0 sleep, but I'd had worse mornings. Usually, I had the soft filter of my painkillers and my stabilizers to help me push through the worst parts of the morning, even if it did come with the trade-off of nausea and a fuzzy head. At least in the pain, my mind was clear, sharper than any of Yevhenii's comments could be. Who left all their crap in the middle of the floor? Being ignored seemed to bother Yevhenii, though. In the mirrored walls of the studio, I watched her kick my things aside and settle her belongings in their place. My terminal bounced out of my bag and skittered into the wall. I thought of my mom and how hard both my parents had worked to get me a new terminal before the start of the academy, so they could talk to me during the program. I walked over to the terminal and leaned down to grab it off the floor. I was tired. Practice hadn't even started for the day, and Yevhenii was already testing my patience. Yevhenii's foot swung into my periphery and made contact with my hand. The terminal slammed against the mirrored wall, and in its reflection, I could see the lit-up notification screen crack. The noise stopped in the room before anyone realized that I was already in Yevhenii's face. I hadn't noticed the movement of my body or the distance I'd closed to her in moments. That will to survive again curled in the back of her hindbrains, deciding when it was time to fight instead of fleeing. I was close enough to see the small twitch of surprise on her sweatless, unblemished face. "Do it again," I felt myself saying. Yevhenii took a few moments to realize that none of this was going according to plan. "What did you say?" I slowed it down for her like she was hard of hearing. I said, "Do it again. See what happens." "Girls." We both turned and caught Mina and the studio rep standing at the door, clipboards in hand. "Do we have a problem here?" Mina asked, looking between the both of us. The other girls in the room said nothing. "No problem," Yevhenii said, giving me a PR-ready smile. "We're good." I turned my head slightly, never taking my eyes off Yevhenii. "No problem here." "Okay, if that's the case, I want you guys in position for stretches. We have a lot to cover today." I dropped my cracked terminal into my bag and went back to the center of the studio. Yevhenii was a row ahead of me and slid into place smoothly. Our eyes met in the mirror, and I didn't break the gaze until Mina started to address the group again. I knew in my chest that if I let Yevhenii keep pushing me around, one of us was going to get hurt. And if I didn't do at least something, that person was going to be me. "Okay, we have 1 day until selections, and I need you guys to be in top form. If you have any doubts, squash them. If you have any lingering mistakes, fix them. I need you to be on your shit tomorrow. Some of you will not have another chance at this, so make it count." She brought us through the group's morning warm-up routine, walking between the rows of girls. "Today we're going to work on our chair routine, and I need you guys to focus. If you don't, I guarantee that you will get hurt. Remember your placement." The studio rep helped bring out the metal practice chairs and line them up in the center of the studio. Mina paused by the panel on the mirrored wall and loaded up the dance track. "Okay, everyone, on places. We go on 1, 2, 3. She clicked on the track and the group came to life, clicking into place like clockwork soldiers. I felt my tired limbs go through the motions on autopilot, my chest hammering, aching with effort. I had no idea what the added stress of going through practice without my meds was going to do to me, but I hoped that I could at least push through until tomorrow. Within 2 hours, however, I was regretting those actions. I wasn't fast enough to keep up with the other girls. Even with a warm-up and a whole morning of extra practice, I was just more exhausted. It felt like I didn't have the energy they had to push their bodies harder, to snap into place. My steps felt clumsy as I tried not to let the uncomfortable flutter in my chest slow me down. My muscles were screaming by now, my nose drew in a soft breath, and I tried to visualize the pain so I could focus on the image instead of the sensation. My body breaking down sugar to trade for energy, flooding my muscles with lactic acid. I blinked the sweat out of my eyes and felt the back line shift forward. Yevhenii and the 2 other girls in the front line used the backrest to balance their weights against chairs, leaning back and tossing their hair over their shoulders. After sweeping their bodies forward, they let go of the backrest and stepped up onto the chairs. Each second mattered. If any of us were even a centimeter off mark, we'd either end up getting elbowed or falling flat off the chair. That was when I wondered, how hard would you have to fall off the chair to get hurt? Thanks for listening. If you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, please shoot us a like or a comment about the episode and make sure to hit follow to be notified when new episodes come out. Supporting this way is free and helps get our podcast out there. If you're hearing this on Spotify, make sure to rate our podcast so we can find other great listeners like you. If you'd like to support what we do here, you can become a patron and receive early access episodes before they're aired, view high-resolution chapter art, and be part of our small but growing community. A huge thank you, as always, goes out to my patrons Cheyenne Summers, Chase Wassenar, and Michael Miley. Thanks for tuning in.